Hi, everyone. I'm really excited, along with Adam, to be announcing TVL Tent, which is our TVL or This Valorant Life community. We're going to be opening up registrations December 20th. It's going to be just open for 20 people, and it'll be a $5 USD subscription per month. And I'll throw it over to Adam in terms of what we are hoping for this community to be like.
So there's not really that many communities where you can kind of figure out, your people in terms of like improvement. Like a lot of it is like, people are joining and they're kind of just having fun with the game. So this is going to be a space where if you're really trying to improve and, want to be around people that will support you to do so, that's kind of what it's for. So just some things to keep in mind. It's not going to be a place where you're going to be coping. If you're having a loss streak, stuff like that, you can mention it, but we're not going to feed into the cope. We are wanting to, I guess, emphasize the fact that it's improvement based, and everything that is positive will be aligned with that. And if there's any kind of like negative, I guess, vibes, it's definitely not encouraged here.
Yeah, so we're super excited about that. And Adam and I aren't doing this to make a boatload of money. We're just doing this because we're hoping that this could be a positive place of change for the gaming community. I'm sure it needs it. I'm sure you probably agree. The $5 a month, what we're going to be doing is the $5 a month is going to go into a pool when it reaches $800, which would take a few months. We're going to create a scholarship process where someone will apply. I think we'll probably involve the community members to select the winner, and they're going to get a heavily discounted 2-month coaching program with Adam. And so that's usually costs $1,000. They'll only put $200 towards it. We'll put the 800 from the community fund towards it, and we'll just keep rolling that and doing that as much as we can whenever that number comes up. So we're super excited about this. If you want to join us, please sign up. It's on Ko-fi or Coffee, and we're gonna have links in the community posts.
Yep. Hope to see you guys there.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 42 of This Valorant Life. If you are listening to this, this should be releasing just in the new year. And so we wanted to talk about what it looks like to set goals. What are the questions you should be asking? What are the things that you should consider? And I just want to throw that over to Adam. Like, where do you want to start?
Definitely something with time frame, because like you hear annual goals. If this is the new year for the release of this episode, people are going to be thinking about New Year's resolutions and kind of sticking to that. But then also you can segment that down into like quarterly goals or monthly goals. And I've been struggling, I guess, with understanding how to frame my goals in that time frame to actually stick to it.
I would take it the time frame, maybe even like a level up from that. Goals are great. However, I think if you're going to do any goal that is worth doing, it is going to be hard. There's going to be effort involved, because if we have easy goals, if your goal is to get to McDonald's today, that's not a very hard goal, maybe, unless
Right.
you know unless you're like on crutches, maybe then it's really hard. But I would take it a level up, which is, what is your vision for your life? If you were as successful and could accomplish everything you wanted to, whatever the time frame you want that to be, let's say 5 to 10 years from now, so a good amount of time, what does that look like? And then if you were to create a vision that's compelling and worth working towards, like, the big part is that if you got there in 5 years, you'd be happy. You'd be really excited and satisfied with the progress you'd made. And then if you do that, which is its own exercise, then you can kind of come back to the present, which is year one. What is a reasonable but stretched goal, like something that will stretch you, look like to get to that future vision? So how do you break this down into milestones and then come back to year one and think about what is an appropriate milestone goal for yourself? And I think that's a better one, that if because if you can create those milestone goals and they align with your long-term goal, then that is usually something you're more willing to dedicate and sacrifice for. Ultimately, every good goal is going to be hard, and so you're going to have to make sacrifices. There's going to be times when it feels a little hopeless, but the goal then is that it's so compelling and so exciting about your future, and it's so aligned with who you want to become, that you can stick with it. That's kind of where I would start the conversation.
So it sounds like to me like you start high level, create some type of vision. Maybe that's kind of like the figure out your why. I hear that a lot, and then you're kind of like breaking it down into more of like like I guess like a program or like a plan. Like if I'm thinking about it from like a work standpoint, and they have like a 5 year plan or like a 5 year vision or something, and then like year one, this is like the roadmap. Is that kind of what we're looking at here? Is like creating a roadmap to how to get there?
The reality is, like, we don't know exactly what that roadmap is going to get to or what it's going to look like because we haven't lived that year yet. I think what's helpful is to say, one, when you land in that future vision, and the exercise I do with people I work with is to give them a pretty concrete task of 5 to 10 years from now. Imagine yourself in that future, and live that day in your life and write it down. Like, what does it look like? What are you excited about? What are you reflecting on relative to today? How are you feeling? What's the house you're living in, or the place you're living in? What are you doing with your day? What do your relationships look like? And really land that future vision in a reality that looks and feels and sounds real. And then when you do that, part of it is to step back and notice, like, what's exciting or special about that. And then when you come back to this year, there's no perfect way of doing this. And goals are more about steering your day and giving yourself clarity in terms of what you should be aligning on, rather than, if you set the perfect goal, it's going to be the perfect thing and therefore set up the year perfectly. The reality is, like, you want a goal that is aligned generally with that direction. It's going to get you to that vision or a step along the way to that vision. And then that is going to help align what you're spending your time on. So I don't know that it matters that much that you break it down quarterly. I think that can be helpful. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. I think what is helpful is, whatever your goals are, is to try to break that, let's say, year one goal into some level of process or commitment that will either guarantee that goal and make it inevitable, or significantly move you towards that goal. So an example would be, you know, Adam, if one of your goals were to grow on YouTube's X number of subscribers, you could create a subscriber goal on a quarterly basis. I think what would be healthier would be to commit to some level of content submission goals on a monthly basis. Like, I'm going to do 3 videos a month, and one of them will be for reach, and two will be for the hardcore Valorant player that wants to know nitty gritty stuff. Because ultimately, there's some element here of, you want a process goal that both moves you towards the goal, but it has to be aligned with you too. Like, it shouldn't, if it's all reach and all entertainment, that's not really who you are either. And so you'd be kind of selling yourself out to follow a goal like that, or a process goal like that.
Okay. So maybe to dig into an example that might be more applicable to our audience, let's just say like I have a 5 year goal to be a professional player or
Yes.
something of that nature. Then a 1 year goal, well, I guess like maybe backing up one step further, is I would probably outline what my day would look like. So maybe I wake up and do some practice and then eat and exercise and do some more practice and whatever the case may be, like really outlining that. And then I would look into my 1 year goal. So I guess that depends on where you are at your rank, but what would that look like? So like if my 5 year goal is to go pro, outline my
Yes.
day, what does my 1 year look
I
like?
think the one caveat, like, we need to make about going pro is that there's two parts to this. There is the reality that very few people make it.
Okay.
And so there is that possibility that you do all of the things right and you don't make it. And there's also luck. There's the potential that you might have been more than good enough to become a good pro, but for whatever reason you've never made the right connections, or you're not in the right circles, or the timing was just a little off, and that's possible. So I think when you commit to a goal like that, part of it is one, you're committed regardless. Like there's nothing else that you would want to do. And two, that you acknowledge that it may not happen, but you would be happy about having committed to it regardless. So that would be number one. Because, you know, I can make a goal that I'm going to make the NBA, but the reality is no matter how hard I focus on that, I can't overcome the genetics that I'm 5'10" and not that athletic, you know?
Okay.
So there is like a fundamental question there. But assuming that's your goal, that's your vision, then yeah, I would break it down into year one goals, right? And I think if I were to think about it, the year one goal, I wouldn't even get into your day yet. I think because we don't know exactly what a perfect day will look like for you. I think the year one goal, if you're already an immortal, like year one goal, like you are going to need to make it to Radiant. And if you can't make it to Radiant, then that would indicate that it's not going to be in the cards. And if you're not yet in Immortal, then I think the year one goal would be to like make it to Immortal. Then the question is like, what is the process you would do by which to get there? And so I think that starts with on a quarterly basis. And how do we break this down? On a weekly basis, what does a good week look like in terms of just allocation of hours to aim training, VOD review, agent mastery in terms of just custom maps, and then how many games do you want to be playing a week? And I think there's an element there where we don't know exactly what your ideal day looks like. I think I would probably start at a high level of how many hours you want to be spending on what. Try something for the first couple of weeks and see how it goes, and notice which parts of that structure are working for you and which parts aren't, and then just try to keep making it better. You know, you realize that playing 2 blocks a day really doesn't work for you, so let's try making one longer block, or maybe just spreading it out more, or playing on more days, like figuring out how to make your block work on more days, something like that.
So I hear um, adjustments need to be made along the way. And in my personal experience, that requires a level of awareness or maybe even outside perspective so that we can make those adjustments. I guess the blanket question would be like, how do you get that awareness, or like how do you make those pivots? Is it like a weekly checkup, like, oh, I did this for a week and now I make the adjustment? Or is it more free form where I notice something and then I actually actionify it like quickly? Like, I guess it depends on person to person, but where do I start with that?
Well, let's just start off with the fact that to some level we're all unself-aware. Sometimes we all have blind spots, and there's nothing that will fix that forever or make that never a problem, but we can get better at it. And I think when I look at my career and the things that have benefited me, we want think like we often think of, at least this is for me, I feel that we look at life and we often think of everything as very, very linear, right? It's just like point A to point B, and we just go up that track. And I think if you even just think about your Valorant career, you will know that there are inflection points, that the slope of the line is not constant. Sometimes it's up, sometimes it's down, and sometimes it's pretty steeply up. Sometimes you just level up. I think reflection is similar. The practice, though, I think, is that you may not get crazy, amazing insight about yourself all the time. The practice, though, is just to be looking for it consistently. And on a daily basis, I feel like is too much. On a monthly basis, I feel like is too little. I think it's a super helpful process for most people. And I know this has been really helpful for me. I do this on Saturdays. I will take 2 hours to look at my week. What did I do? What didn't I do? Look ahead to the next week. Reflect on what is working well and what isn't, and what I might want to change. And what you'll notice is that when you do this process consistently, you kind of catch those things a little faster, and you can make those adjustments that you need. And sometimes you'll get this, crazy insight of, wow, if I just change this one thing, everything is way easier. But you don't get that every week. But if you make it a process of doing some level of review of your week, it's easier to not go through the motions. We talk about it in Valorant, and more commonly in League, when players go on autopilot. And we can go autopilot in our lives too, where we don't realize that the fact that we are mindlessly scrolling on our phone every night for 2 hours before we go to bed. It might be bad for our sleep. It might be bad for going to bed on time, right? But it's when you can reflect and look at your week and did you have energy? Did you not have energy? Everyone will have a different checklist to go through. That's when we can start to notice that stuff more and make it easier, create that muscle of being able to notice how things are going, to become more self-aware by cultivating it as a standard practice rather than hoping for insight to strike us. So I think for most people, having some level of a weekly review would be super supportive, both
Okay.
of their lives and of course, like in this case, if we're talking about reaching Radiant, it would be some level of weekly review on your process around getting better at the game.
Gotcha. So reflecting, well, I guess number one, you need clarity, and then you need direction, and then you need some type of reflection. And then I guess the last point of all of this is probably consistency. Like, how often are you going to be tackling this thing? So I guess that's where the process goals come into play. So just reflecting on the most recent goal that I've achieved for myself, which to be fair wasn't really a stretch goal, was my goal to get back to Radiant.
Yep.
And I believed that I would be able to get it in 30 days, but it ended up being 90 days total, but 64 days of playing. And that ended up, what was I going to say? That kind of came about, like I achieved it because of the consistency factor, like me streaming Monday through Friday for roughly 4 hours every day. Like that was able to get me over the line, even if all the other things wasn't super optimized. But how do you know, I guess, if your consistency is, maybe I need to reframe the question, is like, the consistency is one of the biggest parts of achieving your goal.
Yes. Showing
up. That changes per goal, but how much of the importance goes between like that? Like, I'm not wording this question great, but consistency is important. Yeah, consistency is important.
Yeah.
How do we go about that? Like, is that prioritized over everything else, or?
I think it's a good question. I just want to point out though that whether you can see it or not, I remember we talked about this. You took longer to get Radiant than you had hoped.
Mm-hmm.
And it took kind of a reckoning of, oh, what got me there before isn't going to get me there today. The game has moved. The game has changed. I'm a different player. The meta is different. And in some ways, your process of creating videos was your inherent reflection process. You had to watch those games. You had to notice what was going well and what wasn't. And that was actually part of the reflection process that helped change your arc of improvement to eventually get there. But consistency is super important. And that's where I think we would move. Like the reason it's super important. I mean, of course it's important. The level that it supports you though is taking something that's completely out of your control, which is how do you get to Radiant? You have to win X number of games. You can't just will yourself to win those games. So then when you create a process goal, the really helpful part is you take something that feels uncontrollable and you try to create a process goal for which you are completely in control. Like you're going to play 3 games a day, you're going to be high intensity, and you're going to review them. The consistency piece, I think, is that, and this will ebb and flow in that journey. There will be times when it's right at the beginning, when it's really exciting and it's pretty easy. We have to understand that there will be times in the pursuit of every goal, if it's sufficiently hard, that it's going to be hard. You're going to not want to get out of bed that day to do the thing that you commit to. So part of it then is it all does kind of come full circle to that first thing we talked about, is that vision, that ultimate goal that you're working towards. Is it really a reflection of your heart? Is it really a reflection of something that is truly important to you? If it is truly important to you, then you can keep going after that thing even when it gets hard from a consistency perspective. So that would be number one. Number two is, and this is a very personal thing, I think, which is even if we are super committed to going after something, and we have cultivated an ability to get after it even when we don't want to. Sometimes you still don't want to do it. And there's an element there of then understanding what are the tactics that we have to kind of trick ourselves into doing things. And this is a lot of like atomic habits. So for a lot of people, that means you just make it artificially small. So your goal is to get to the gym. Make it not your goal to go to the gym. The goal that day is to just put on your athletic gear and put on your shoes. And then once you do that, you're like, I'm committed. I'm gonna go to the gym. Or make it your goal to just get to the gym and do 5 minutes. And when you realize you do it for 5 minutes, that feels really small and not that hard. You'll end up staying for an hour, right? So I think there's an element of trying out these little tactics that help push you to be consistent as well. The weekly review also helps you be consistent because part of it is just tracking the things that you track and you notice helps you stay both more consistent and more honest with yourself, because it's easy to think that you did better than you did, but when you actually look back at your week, it's fairly objective when you look at the data like that.
Okay. Um, Thinking about what you said, like reflecting on my goals and like my experience is specifically in the work stuff is like I have these goals. I think they're pretty clear. Um, and I had process goals as well. But the hard part about all of this, which is the consistency piece, is I'm not being consistent. I'm not actually taking action. So I
Okay.
guess like there's two pieces to this. Is like number one, you actually have to create your goal and all of that background stuff so you kind of know what you're going to do, like create the plan. And then the second part is actually executing onto the plan. And some people can not have that clear, like have not done step one that well, but have taken a lot of action and just played a lot and have gotten to where they wanted to go despite not roughly like just knowing the rough direction.
Mhm.
And then some people probably are in the complete opposite bucket where they have this clear thing, but then they're not actually taking the steps. And I think I fall into that second
Well,
part.
I mean, my question for you then is, how compelling is that goal for you? Because here's the thing is, uh, we sometimes think we want something, and sometimes we want it more than we actually do. You know, sometimes we think we want something, it's actually someone else's dream. You know, sometimes you go after something, it's your parents' dream, it's your partner's dream. Sometimes it's not your dream, and so I think it's important to be able to realize sometimes whose dream you're chasing, and to be honest with yourself about that, because that's a choice. And I think it's really important to realize that you are always at choice, like you always get to make a decision. And so maybe that's something you're wanting to mold yourself into, like you do want that to be your dream, even sometimes if you don't feel it that way. That's okay. But I think you have to recognize that that's a process as well.
Mm, okay. Okay. So we've talked a lot about goals, I guess, and making the plan
Mhm.
and executing on it. But something that we haven't really covered, I guess, is categories. So
Mhm.
like you have goals in all of these different aspects of your life. You have health goals, you have fitness goals, you have financial goals. Is there Does that just come in seasons, or should you have goals for each one, or should you just focus on one goal in each like of that category? Should you prioritize it? Like where does that kind of land with you?
The thing that has been really sticking with me so much lately, and I think it's actually true at so many levels, is that there are, and it's a quote, and I forget who to attribute it to, but there are no solutions. There are only trade offs. And in some ways, you can think of that in Valorant too. A lot of the things you would tell people to do are not really solutions; they're trade offs. You're making a guess in that moment to make a good decision. I think when you look at goals, the reality is, if you are really, let's say, really overweight and you really want to get really fit, and that's going to take a ton of work, it's going to be a ton of learning in terms of going to the gym and spending time at the gym, but a huge learning curve in terms of diet, in terms of cooking food and understanding macros. There are no solutions, there are only trade-offs. You that is an amount of time that you are not going to get back. The reality is, if you try to do that, and then say I'm also going to be trying to be radiant, and I'm also going to read like 20 books on finance and learn about investing. Like the reality is you're going to be spread so thin you're going to do none of these things. And so I think there is an element here of noticing how big the goal is, how much you're willing to sacrifice, and or even just understanding that you only have so many resources. You have your time, you have your money, you have the level of willpower. And so how big is the goal? How much can you be putting towards it? And then how much do you have left for everything else? So I think if your goals are reasonably small in all areas, you're just kind of tweaking, then you can probably do them all at once. But if your goals are really big and are going to take a ton of time and are a huge shift for you, you probably cannot do them all at once. And I think in that case, thinking of it in terms of seasons, I'm gonna have a season of getting fit, and a season of nailing my diet, and then a season of consistency of just putting both together and living that for a while before I tackle like a new big goal. I think is a totally good way of looking at it, and I think a much healthier way of looking at it than trying to be everything to everyone all at once and not doing any of it.
I like that. I was reflecting on this, and we spoke a little bit about this before the call. Is like when you're in the, I guess, career choice that I guess where I'm in and somewhat you're in, and just any other creators is like content creation or like entrepreneurship or self-employment. You're the one pushing the cart. You're the one moving things forward, and you're kind of responsible for your finances and just everything. So it's very easy for me, at least, to have so much priority on that, because if the work doesn't work and you're not making money, everything else kind of just, doesn't work out because you need money. So I'm having a really hard time, I guess, balancing that with other areas of my life, which is like, for example, physically,
Mm-hmm.
I'm, not eating or going to the gym as much, but I also recognize how important that is, because let's say like I was very fit and healthy and gained weight and exercising consistently, that would have trickle down effects into my work as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I could also, like, I can already hear my mind justifying it vice versa. Well, if you had more money and you had more resources, it would also be easier
Mm-hmm.
on the other end
Mm-hmm.
of things. And I guess like it's not necessarily a question, but more so like a problem that I think I don't really know how to tackle.
We all have limited resources in terms of time, money, effort, even knowledge, right? I think if I'm looking at my career arc, I think there's an element of also being able to remind ourselves what are the things that I really believe in and hold on to in spite of how things are going at the moment. And so I think for me, an example of that would be in the 2 years since I left a solid career to go work on my own and to be kind of my own entrepreneur. I think what I realized was one, I was never going to fail or fall short because I was unwilling to be uncomfortable. And so I actually like continuously have sought out things that have made me tremendously nervous and uncomfortable. And it has served me incredibly. And so even when I wasn't sure where things were going, I would lean into that. That's something I believe in. And I trust that that will serve me well. The other one is that we don't know exactly how things are going to turn out. And I remember I was listening to a Tim Ferriss podcast, and he was talking about how he selects his projects, and he selects his projects based on, regardless of whether it works or not, that he will have come out of it with new skills and capability and learning. And so to be able to select the things that you do like that, I think is super helpful, because the only thing that is constant in your life, the only common denominator to all of your life's problems is you. So the ultimate investment you can ever make is in yourself.
And by that logic, I guess from a category standpoint, it almost makes the most sense to me. Maybe it's just because where I'm at in life right now, to invest in yourself quite literally, like physically. Like if you're not in shape or you're not healthy, maybe that's where you start, and then it gives you a better I guess, springboard to tackle other stuff. Because let's just kind of rewind time. Like if I go back to where I was 3 years ago, I was really unhealthy, mentally didn't really know where I was going, and I was trying to go pro. And like my goal was to go pro, but I didn't attribute any of my, I guess, seasons or goals to getting healthy. And I think that cut my grind short, my longevity on all that really short. So I wasn't able to pursue that anymore. So it sounds like, well, I guess like the conclusion I'm reaching is like there's a minimum threshold that you have to kind of obtain in all of these categories of your life. Like you won't be able to pursue health goals if you don't have money. You won't
Correct.
be able to pursue money goals if you don't have your health. So you kind of have to figure that out, hit the minimum threshold, and then kind of go from there. And maybe for people listening, maybe you start with the health because gaming is unfortunately so high risk.
Gaming is always going to be there. But I think the reality is like you'd much rather have reached your goal and be really happy with your health rather than the other way around, right? And I
Mm,
think the reality is like it, it is hard. Uh, it isn't easy to take care of your health and to, get where you want to go and feel stronger. But you can make so much progress by just showing up and doing the things. And I think that will, for most people, will put you in a way better position to succeed elsewhere. I would say two things. I would say taking care of investing in your health, investing in your mind. Like I know for me personally, one of the biggest things that has really helped me in my career is this commitment to reading and to learning things. You know, the only thing I get to carry around in the world is my brain. And so if I'm learning and growing as a person consistently, then I am leveling up. I'm more capable of tackling the problems that are coming at me. I have more insight into issues in general. Um, and if I'm growing in that area, it kind of naturally leaks over to other areas. And it keeps me personally, I think, from going on autopilot. That I'm always learning. I'm trying to integrate new things and trying to understand more than the world. And I know for me, it's like tremendously. It's been
that definitely makes me reflect on the time of my life where I thought I was most productive. And that's when I was leveling up the most. In like I was consistently going to the gym, and that's like at the time was when I first went to the gym, so I was getting newbie gains. But I also had a friend that was helping me come along with it, and then I was journaling every day, I was reading every day, I was not meditating every day, but it was a practice I was trying to get to. And like as an extension, it sounds kind of obvious now that I'm saying it, but I made the most progress in like work related stuff, like not at the same time, but shortly after, like following that type of momentum that I had earlier. And the place I'm at now is like, I'm not on top of those habits at all. And I feel like I'm slowly getting slower to the point to where I'm
mm,
probably going to hit a reversal at some point and kind of go down. Now, I don't think I've hit that point yet,
mhm.
but very much like when I was playing Valorant, getting back to Radiant, I noticed that in my climb. I'm bringing it back to Valorant a little bit. Like I was using RR as a metric. Now I wasn't really tied to the rank or the RR, but I would like review it every so often and like take myself out of autopilot. And I was like, oh, like I'm stuck at this RR or whatever. Let me look up the win rates or why am I losing? And then I would kind of go and make progress there. And it's like up, down, up, down. And I was able to course correct and eventually hit the Radiant after I recognized what was working and what wasn't on that note. I don't even know
Mhm.
how I got to that point, but
Mhm.
yeah, I guess it's interesting to think about in hindsight, and I guess just trying to apply that moving forward.
I think it's easy in the moment to get caught up on things. And I mean, the weekly review is a really useful exercise. Having someone you trust to give you an opinion is also so useful and helpful because we can't kind of see ourselves from the outside. So having someone in that role is also an enormous gift. But to just go back to my previous point, I wanted to leave with this because I think in terms of investing in yourself, it always just stuck with me. So Charlie Munger was the partner of Warren Buffett, And one thing he talked about was that he just felt like the most important investment he could ever make was in himself. And so as a young lawyer, he would sell himself an hour a day and he would read. And I think for one of the most well-read people and most one of the successful investors, I think it just gives us a blueprint. If we want to grow into that future vision, it requires us to create a process that we commit to where we grow as people. We don't just get there. Like we're going to have to grow as people. And so I think committing to some sort of learning or personal growth, whether that's health or knowledge or both, I think is a huge, like a really important aspect.
Tying this back into that initial Valorant Gold Pro vision before, I like, where would they start with reading? Because off the top of my head, you have some performance books you could probably look at.
Yeah.
Um,
Mastering the inner game of tennis. There's some performance psychology books. I know a fellow, his name is Alex Auerbach. Subscribe to his newsletter. It's called Perform. He's got great stuff in there in terms of performing. Um, I think there's that you would start there for sure.
okay.
I think there's also other stuff you can read that's adjacent. It's a heavy read, but I think is would be super useful for people. Read Range by David Epstein. I'm just looking at that on my bookshelf right now. That was great. Um, The Art of the Impossible, great book. You read that as well. Um, uh, Thinking Fast and Slow, bit of a heavy book, but super useful in the world to understand and notice where your cognitive biases are. That book talks a lot about the fact that we are way more loss averse than we are win happy, and you can see that in our games. When you play Valorant, how often do we play not to lose and not play to win? Sometimes playing to win means making that ballsy, crazy play that could look really stupid, but it's your out, and so you make that move. But I think a lot of times we play not to lose, and so I think that book explains a lot about the world and can help us understand some of our innate biases as well. So yeah.
So
So I mean, books to read. I think you can start there. I think you can start with some type of health goal. Like, it doesn't need to be some crazy health goal. You don't need to look like the Rock. Like maybe your health. Like I mean, most people probably don't want to look like the Rock. I think having some type of health goal of just making it to the gym a certain number of times a week is a great one. And then some type of process goal around the games you want to play and how often you want to be reviewing.
definitely makes sense. I think another thing to mention with this too is like getting better at Valorant comes from getting better in other areas of your life as well. Just because you can grind a game out, but there's limited. It's a lot of your mindset. Like when you go into Valorant, you have to improve a lot with your mindset, your approach, and all of that stuff. And if you don't, I guess, level up as a person, you won't really level up in the game if your mindset isn't there.
100%. If you go into your games and you are thinking it's my teammates, it's Riot, it's I'm in losers queue, like you're hooped. This is a hard game, and I think Adam, you could attest to this. As you get higher in the ranks, it gets harder and harder. The minutia, the little details that you have to focus on and improve on, gets smaller and smaller and smaller because everyone's doing it. And so you need to make tiny improvements. You have to be a student of the game. And so if you're not a student of the game, if you're just autopiloting it or making excuses for yourself, like you're not going to improve. Like even if you can commit to some of these processes. So part of it, yeah, is 100% mindset as well.
So where do we go from? Like, let's say like a viewer is listening, they made it this far. Where do they go from here?
I mean, I think it'd be super supportive of any listener to just think about, where they want to be 5 years from now, and maybe Valorant is a significant part of that goal. Maybe it isn't. Maybe there's a season of Valorant. Maybe it isn't. But I think it starts with that, and then thinking about this year's goals, like when this podcast releases, we will be in the first week or two of 2025. If you imagine yourself at the year end, at the end of 2025, what's something you'd be really excited to have accomplished? and how would that feel? And if it feels really, really great and exciting, then I think you have probably a pretty good goal for yourself. So set that goal, put it on your mirror, put it in front of you somewhere, and create some process goals for yourself that you think will be making it inevitable for you to get there. And just know that in this first month or 2 months, um, it's okay if those process goals change or that they're not on track. Part of this is you are living the experiment of your life and you don't know exactly what works well and what doesn't work well now. So test it out and notice, and then steer, shift course if it isn't working. And then by the end of the year, if you do that consistently, if you don't reach that goal, you're going to be way closer than you were. And I would be astonished if you weren't close.
So to make it very frictionless, what platform would this take place on? Like, is this like a Google Docs thing? Is this a Notion thing? Is this a get pen and paper out?
This is a
like,
pen and paper thing.
in
My opinion, because it doesn't need to be complicated. Pen and paper, um, make it easy. Post-it notes on your computer. Post-it note on your bathroom mirror, wherever you would just notice it. Just make it easy, and don't get into the cycle of trying to find the perfect system that makes this easy. Um, Everyone will have something to sell you, whether that's like Second Brain or Notion stuff. And it, I mean, when you get really complicated, sure, like maybe 10 years down the line, 5 years down the line, maybe you need a really complicated system. But today, for most people, I don't think you need a complicated system.
Keep it simple. Grab a paper, couple papers maybe, pencil, pen, and go write down some stuff. Okay.
Yeah, and just check in with your heart. Are you excited about this? And if not, I think there's another question of like, well, what are you excited about, right? It's important to be able to reflect back on those things. So I hope this was helpful to everyone. I hope this would be helpful for you as you think about how to plan for your year in 2025. We'd be super excited to hear how you're doing and what your goals are. And yeah, we just hope this was helpful for you.
Good luck out there, guys.
Thanks for joining us, everyone.